Ready?
All right.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Advancement Live. Ryan Catherwood here at Longwood University. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We thought we had our ducks in a row from a sound standpoint, but lo and behold, we were dealing with a pretty good echo in the background, and it was making things pretty much unwatchable and not worth your time or ours. So we tried to fix it, and for right this very moment, we don't seem to have that same echoey feedback. So we're gonna press on with the show. Um, Let me first reintroduce my guests on the show today. We have Chris Vallejos, who is a independent alumni engagement consultant, formerly of the Thunderbird Independent Alumni Association, the executive director. Chris, how are you today?
Ryan, I'm great. It is really good to be on the show. I've heard lots about it and very pleased to be here.
Great. Great to have you. And Bob Bachnack up at the Harvard Business School. Bob, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Bob, you are the Assistant Director, Alumni Marketing and Communications, right?
Yep.
Very good. At the end of the show, I will reread our sponsor plugs, but for right now, let's get back into the conversations. We started off the show talking about engaging MBA alumni or engaging alumni of graduate programs in different ways beyond engaging undergraduates. Let's talk a little bit more about engaging alumni of undergraduate programs specifically versus graduate programs. Maybe you guys can talk about some of the differences there. Bob, you lead off.
So, essentially, undergraduate alumni, in my experience, seem to be have more affinity for the institution as a whole. The undergraduate experience, per se, events like homecoming and such, and graduate alumni are much more connected to their classmates, to some of the professors they studied under. It's more about the people they went to school with. Now at HBS things are a little bit more unique, since alumni they're here for 2 years as students. They are connected to the university, to the Harvard Business School as a whole, but essentially what they're looking for is to deepen those connections, and hear about what their classmates were doing, to kind of keep touch with them.
And Chris, obviously, the folks from formerly of the Thunderbird School, but maybe you could talk more in broad terms. So, what are some of the differences that you see as far as the needs of graduates of MBA or master's level business type programs versus undergraduates?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say that I think there tends to be a high level of affinity across the board, but affinity is really different for undergraduates, especially those of large public institutions with strong athletic programs. It's very much of a rah-rah type affinity, as Bob mentioned, really supporting the brand. Graduates of MBA programs such as Thunderbird, very strong affinity toward the school, but it's very different. It's more of a you self-select to go there. It's much more of a professional affinity. But when it comes to the engagement, the alumni network, I think, really takes on much greater importance at the MBA level as far as career advancement, those kinds of connections. And as far as engagement, alums don't really get involved to organize tailgates or social events. The MBA grads that I've known are really much more inclined to help with communications and volunteer opportunities to support the program, to support the network, not so much to support the brand, if you will.
Yeah, that makes sense. That there would be far more affinity towards the school spirit aspect for perhaps your undergraduate institution versus your graduate institution. Perhaps not exclusively. You could easily find yourself, if you graduated from a undergraduate experience that did not have a really significant athletics program, maybe you would align yourself perhaps with the program, the sports program of your graduate school. But Robert or Bob, could you talk a little bit about needs of MBA alumni? You alluded to the idea of the network, right? And these folks are professionals
Yep.
as they're getting additional education. What are their needs, and how do they like to engage there?
Their needs really run the gamut. They want to connect with fellow alumni in their field. They want to connect with alumni in the same geographic location that they're in. A lot of our alumni are also producing blog posts, video content. They're recording articles. So, like anyone, they would like to see that work promoted, kind of broadcast, if you will. So, what we try to do is we'll share blog posts and other content with the classmates of these alumni, specifically on Twitter, to help not only support the alum who penned the article or is mentioned in the article, but also kind of give everyone an update on what's going on. And the goal is to engender some type of reaction from the alumni we're sending the content to, but also the alumni that we're help promoting. It might be a like, it might be a retweet, it might be a comment, and then we try to leverage that conversation further. So if someone comments on some information about a classmate, we might ask them a follow-up question. Do you have anything new to share? How was this event? Or so to use all our content as a springboard for further conversation. So it's hard to say alumni want one specific thing. What we try to do is look at each alum on an individual basis and see how we can serve them. So it's really a customer service model that we've adopted.
Makes total sense. Yeah, Chris, let's explore a little bit further. Bob moved us into the digital engagement realm as far as connecting with alumni through social media. Could you expand a little bit more about the growing role of digital in the realm of engaging graduate school alumni, in particular MBA alumni?
Yeah, it's interesting how this question is framed, because sometimes I hear the notion of digital engagement as if it's a new concept. I mean, in our daily lives, separate from higher education, what we do in our lives, we rely on social media, digital engagement. It's just how we live. And so I think there's an expectation of our alumni that we be digital savvy. And if you have an alumni base that's global, Thunderbird certainly does, I know that Harvard does, then digital engagement is absolutely essential. I think back to many years ago. I was at Ohio State, the Alumni Association, and we had this saying, this is circa 2001, 2002, that we never wanted to be more than 2 years behind the current technological curve. Well, obviously that's not acceptable these days. I mean, we have to be on it, and we just have to meet the expectations of alumni. It's a digital world, and we have to play in that realm.
Well, while we're talking about it, I like the digital stuff myself. Let's explore a little bit further. Can we talk a little bit about perhaps how things have changed within the digital space? Bob, I'm particularly thinking about LinkedIn and LinkedIn groups. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on LinkedIn groups, how they have been both a positive and perhaps you've seen a decline in those groups as an engagement potential? If that's just an area where we can crack the surface, I think, and Chris, you can follow up there.
So when it comes to LinkedIn groups, I mean, for us, they're a great place because you get a critical mass of alumni in one place. It's a really popular platform to begin with, so we use it more or less to broadcast content, to share updates. And we also use it as a means to generate user-generated content. For our alumni bulletin, for example, we have a case study question. So essentially, an alum who has a startup will share a problem they're having, and we'll essentially try to crowdsource a solution. So we'll post the question onto LinkedIn, and we usually get a lot of responses, 35 to 40 responses, very well thought out responses from alumni, providing advice to a fellow alum. So in that realm, it's very, very helpful. One of the challenges with LinkedIn groups, from my perspective, it's not a great place to have ongoing conversations like Twitter or Facebook is. So we steer away from putting out we have questions that we post to alumni on our social media platforms. We'll push out those questions, but they really don't have a great feasibility for us on LinkedIn. So if there's any drawback, it's that. And also, unless, and correct me if I'm wrong, unless you have your notifications turned on LinkedIn for a particular group, you won't see the content that's being shared unless you post it as an announcement. So I think there's definitely pros and cons to each, to LinkedIn. As an aside, another pro for me, it's a great place to do research. So if I'm looking, we're having a conversation about product management in a couple of days. So I'm going to go to LinkedIn, my LinkedIn group, put product management as a search criteria, and see if I can find alumni who we can engage in that conversation. So it is a good research tool as well.
Yeah, great stuff. Chris, how do you feel about LinkedIn in general, perhaps LinkedIn groups in particular?
Well, there's so many aspects of LinkedIn, and we don't even have time today to talk about all that. I recall doing an event in London and Paris, and having this when I was at Case Western Reserve, and having a sense that we had a lot more alums in those markets than what we had on the university database. And lo and behold, we did an analysis. It was kind of labor intensive, but we discovered that there were so many more good addresses and good information on LinkedIn than what the university had. And this makes sense. If you ever have a job change, the first thing you do is you update your LinkedIn profile. You often don't go back to your university or school because of you've got a password to register and so forth. So often the LinkedIn data is far more accurate. It also used to be that we could build a fence around our alumni. We had control over everything. And in order for you to communicate with our alums, you had to register, join the Alumni Association, and so forth. Well, with social media, we cede that control to the universe. We put out our own content on LinkedIn, but groups can certainly form on their own, and we just kind of have to accept that. So while we push content out to our groups in various shapes and sizes, there are other groups that kind of do their own thing. When I was at Thunderbird, there was a LinkedIn group that was very active called Save Thunderbird, which kind of its roots were back in the conflict that the university had, that the school had a few months earlier. And there were some pretty sharp opinions that were raised there that weren't entirely accurate, and we would monitor it somehow. But the point is, it's a great way to communicate to many more alumni. They use it much more actively than, say, the school's alumni network. But there are some pros and cons, certainly. But you have to be a player there. There's no question.
But let's explore a little bit further into the idea of content sharing, right? While we're in the depths of digital engagement here. Bob, you had mentioned the idea of throwing out programs to the stakeholder population, which of course includes alumni, to see if you can crowdsource a solution. But ultimately, I think a lot of it comes down to the paradigm of advice, right? Advice-based content. What did you do? What did you learn? What would you advise? Can you guys talk a little bit about how to collect that content? Is there a great way to reach out to alumni, to create contributors, an environment where alumni feel compelled to contribute their advice?
Mm-hmm. So for us, it's really a model that I tried to launch when I first came here. It's an identify, engage, leverage model. So the first step, and this is primarily on Twitter, but also on other platforms, is you identify the alumni on the platform. So let's say Twitter. You identify them and you get them onto Twitter lists. So you can essentially monitor what they're doing on a daily basis. The engagement portion of the model is, like I was talking about earlier, you share their blog posts, you connect them with section mates, you take a really active approach to engage them. It's kind of a forward approach. You're not asking for anything at that point. You're essentially just trying to provide them with something. Then the leveraging, so you've built this goodwill, and the leveraging process is you ask them to provide user-generated content. So it may be these case study questions, but it may be something else. It may be we have the product management question. We have another question for alumni. But at that point, we've built really good digital relationships with these individuals, so they're compelled to respond. And then what we do with that content is we typically put it onto a Storify, and we publish a Storify. We also put some of the comments into collages. We'll grab tweets and put them into other formats to try to diversify the content. But for us, the most important thing is to identify these people, and you engage with them, and you build that goodwill. So hopefully on the other end, they'll be more engaged with you and provide essentially their opinion on things. We're not really asking them for anything in the social space besides give us your opinion. What do you think? And we go from there.
Yeah, Bob, I really like how you're linking this to engagement. And in our field, we tend to think of engagement as attending an event, recruiting a student, serving on a committee, things that really take a lot of time. But engagement is also posting a blog or liking something or updating your LinkedIn profile. And I don't think it's any less of a level of engagement when you note that someone is active on LinkedIn or your Facebook page or something like that. I mean, it may be a little bit difficult to track, but engagement is engagement.
Yep. Back to the tracking issue. So what we've tried to do is we track essentially everything. So it really started from when I first came here. Every alum who interacts with us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook is added to an Excel spreadsheet that we have. So you get the first name of the person, their last name, the year they graduated, the section they were part of, where they live geographically based on their Twitter bio, as well as their interest based on their Twitter bio. So we have that data to draw from to do the direct engagement. And then when they interact with us, we'll add that information to the spreadsheet. So you'll have, if someone favorites a tweet, that gets a 1. They favorite another tweet the next day, they got 2 favorites for that time period. And we collect all that information at the end of the month so I can report on a monthly basis how many unique alumni interactions we had with how many alumni. And we can also provide this information on an annual basis. So that's kind of an example of, engagement is great, but if you don't have data to back it up, you'll lose a lot. So we try to take the approach of it's really data heavy as far as the outreach and the collection of information.
Agreed. It's an interesting phenomenon with social media. I used to, when I was at Case Western Reserve, used to post on our Facebook page a provocative question every day just to see how many people would respond. And one day the question was, do you feel engaged with the institution? And one gentleman wrote, not at all. I don't feel engaged one bit. I'm thinking, wait a minute.
He's engaged right now.
Yeah, he's engaged right now. He's bookmarked the Facebook page. He has responded to the question. He's taken time out of his day to get back to us. How is that not engagement? Of course, there's a metrics component. We entered him in the system and so forth. But this also gave me an opportunity to reach out personally to say, if you don't feel engaged, kind of are, let's find ways to bring you more into the family and so forth. So just a very interesting take on using social media, not just measuring it, which I agree, Bob, is essential, just kind of how we look at it, how we bring alumni into the fold. And we've all been to alumni events where if we have 30 or 40 people show up, that's a pretty good number. You post a question on Facebook and within an hour you have 800 responses. Yeah. You can't argue with that.
Yeah. Yeah, so much of the opportunities that exist in the realm of alumni engagement in general, but perhaps even more broadly for graduates of MBA type programs is engaging not at an event, not at a place and time, right? Engaging along the way multiple times a week, and can you assess the effectiveness of that, deploy resources towards it and away from event-based initiatives. For example, let's contrast that specific idea with nostalgia-based initiatives like reunions or on-campus events, as far as what it is that MBA alumni are looking for. Did you guys have robust reunion programs, on-campus event programs? Is it something that you felt that the alumni wanted?
We actually do. We just had a reunion a few weeks ago. So we have 3 reunions a year. We have our 1-year reunion, and we have our class reunions for alumni further out, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. These are awesome events, both generally from engagement, but also from a social media perspective. We have a tremendous amount of engagement with alumni during these events. They're tweeting, they're communicating with us, oftentimes proactively. And what we try to do also is we'll bring alumni who aren't even at the event into the fold. So if we're live tweeting from a session, and let's say it's about strategy, and there's an interesting comment or question about strategy, we'll go back to our data and we'll pull in alumni who are interested in strategy into the conversation. they may not even, they're probably not even in a reunion class. They might be in London or something. But we're bringing them into the conversation. We're actually digitally bringing them back to campus. So for us, it's a win-win. We're engaging with alumni, and we're also creating a visual and digital record of the event. You can go to our store files after each event and not see everything that happened, but can kind of see, you can see a lot of what happened, what we covered, what alumni were talking about, and so forth. So both in general, these are great opportunities for engagement, and from a social media perspective, they're excellent engagement opportunities.
Awesome. Chris, how do you feel about on-campus events in general? Whether they're nostalgia-based initiatives like reunions or bringing in alumni panelists for some sort of speaker series?
Yeah, it's interesting as we move from the digital conversation to the kind of old school reunion feel, the homecoming feel. Let me say this: there's always a place for nostalgia, and MBA graduates are no different. I mean, it's always good to come back, see the school, see the professors, your classmates, the classroom, and so forth. But if this is all you do, you're missing the boat. Come back to class, come back to school, have a tour or whatever, but do some programming. Do something where you're continuing to bring the school to your graduates. They want to be connected intellectually all their lives. That's kind of part of, that's why they go to graduate school. That's why they go to business school. So have a panel discussion, have a lecture, do something like that on campus. Bring that through social media to alums that can't get there, and just make it a very purposeful event. So many homecomings are basically the parade, the football game, visit campus, and then that's basically it. You want alumni, especially the MBA graduates, to leave the school and say, you know what, I'm proud of what's going on. I didn't know that. I want to be an advocate. And you're kind of building this base of advocates, which helps fundraising, which I think is a question down the road. But nostalgia is a good thing, but if that's all you do, I think you are really missing the boat.
Well, let's talk a little bit about engaging current students who, of course, are alumni very quickly, right? It's a short program. Would you say that that alumni of MBA programs or similar programs come in fully understanding the value of the alumni network? And why or why not? And how do you continue to emphasize or show that value, whether it's through engagement, programming, or digital or in person?
I think students coming into HBS definitely understand the relevance of the alumni network. For our end, from a social perspective, what we try to do is, we try to interact with students when they first get here. So if we have a new student that follows us on Twitter, we'll just do a quick search, make sure they're a new student, and we'll welcome them to campus, ask them about how their first few days have been, ask what they want to do career-wise, and if let's say they want to go into venture capital or finance, then we'll take the next step of trying to connect them with fellow alumni on social media who are working in those areas. Say you may want to connect with this individual. So we're really trying to make the connection between the student and the alum, but it's really back to engagement. We're engaging the alumni back to the university. When it comes to students, we keep an eye on what they're doing. We try to share their content. We try to be helpful kind of in the same way alumni are. So if a student tweets that they're feeling overwhelmed with the volume of work, we might share a blog post by an alum who talks about how to decompress, or if a student is looking for a great place to eat in Boston, we know some alumni who are in the restaurant biz, we might poll them. So it's kind of like trying to solve problems for the students as well, trying to help them as much as possible, with the hope that they'll understand as they move through the program that this is what our goal in the digital space is, to provide a customer service to them. So by the time they graduate, they understand it completely, and they're more inclined to engage with us proactively.
It's about the people, right, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you like to think that one reason why students apply to a particular MBA program, one reason is the depth of the alumni network. That's certainly the case with Harvard, but Bob, I mean, you would admit Harvard is kind of an outlier in many respects. Many students have just a vague notion of what the alumni network is all about. And in fact, many alums have a vague notion of how to serve students. So that's one important reason why the alumni office exists, to kind of bring those together. It's a combination of meeting with students during various stages of their degree program, even in the classroom, depending on my relationship with the dean, to talk about the network, and then having a portal for alumni to engage with students, whether, again, it's for advice or an internship or a job. So.
Let's switch gears just a little bit and cover sort of two more topics before the end of the program. Let's talk first about the relevance of regional engagement, regional networks. The Harvard Harvard Business School Alumni Club of Washington, D.C. Let's talk a little bit about, is that something that alumni want, or is it a relic that still exists? Or what is our feeling at this point, without saying something who's going to upset something that's going to upset our regional engagement program managers back at their desks right now?
For our end, I personally think it's very important, just from the perspective that alumni want to connect with each other based on their region. If there's 100 alumni in a particular area, they want to get together somehow. So it's it's very, very important. For them to be able to get together, to share experience about HBS, but also to broaden their professional network. Back to what Chris was saying, like the alumni network is important. It not only can, lead to professional opportunities, but it can lead to personal opportunities. And, since my area of social media, there's really only so much you can do when it comes to bringing people together. There's still face-to-face is still vitally important. It's important to talk to people. What I think we can do is, help provide the first step. I think someone quoted social media as being the place where that help handshakes become hugs. So it's essentially we're the first, take the first step. We can be the introduction, but then at some point down the road, it's helpful if you can have that face-to-face contact to say, hey, I know you from Twitter. It was great interacting with you. And we do that quite a bit, both at regional event and large conferences. Oftentimes, alumni will go to some of the big conferences out there, South by Southwest and some other ones. And what we'll do is we'll come across alumni who are attending those events, and we'll say, hey, by the way, these fellow alumni are at this event. And we've had a lot of cases where they end up taking a selfie together because based on the first step we took on introducing them. So I think regional programs, the regionalism of alumni relations, it's still important. I think it's going to be important forever.
Bob, I'm really glad to hear you say that. And Ryan, we've been talking a lot about digital today and social media, but at the end of the day, it is all about relationships. And there's no substitute for getting together at a venue and shaking someone's hand and talking about careers and so forth. That's how you build those networks. And this is a topic of much discussion in alumni relations circles because there are some alumni networks, some alumni offices that are very small, and the network kind of runs itself. In other cases, the chapters are much more social. They really don't have the resources or the funds to, for instance, bring faculty to them, and that's the role of the alumni office. So, to some degree, we can play a guiding hand, if you will, in helping to fulfill alumni out there in the region. But, I mean, look, alumni offices are all understaffed. There's no alumni office I've ever known that has too much staff. And we are often serving tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of alums. So you have to rely on a great volunteer network, especially a regional network. And so I think there's a real place for it. But the important thing is let's not go too far down the road with digital and social media and not forget the importance of being there from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, important stuff, important considerations as far as with limited resources, as you say, Chris. If you were building a program from scratch, how would you construct it, particularly from a regional standpoint, knowing what we know about opportunities from a digital standpoint? I'm very interested in that space. Guys, let's talk about fundraising as our final question for the show. Is how would you describe the way in which your experiences say that best practice should engage So fundraising should be an engagement activity in and of itself, or part of other engagement activities?
I think for my end, and as I said, it's my area of social media, it's really tough to be able to tell if our efforts are leading to increased alumni giving. Maybe someone a lot smarter than me could figure it out. I have no idea. I think for us, what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on the engagement with the idea of the more engagement you have, hopefully the more inclined people are to donate back to the school monetarily or activity-wise, attending an event, coming back to a reunion. So one of my main goals is to get as much alumni engagement on these platforms as possible. We're getting to, I think either this month or next, we'll cross 30,000 unique alumni interactions since I've been here. I don't know how that translates into giving, but I'm hoping that if anything, alumni feel a little bit more connected to the university based on what we're doing on social media. The nice thing about social media from a giving perspective is we can interact with an alum 30 to 40 times in a single month. We have. I don't think a gift officer can call an alum that many times. So that's one of the benefits from, a soft benefit from a fundraising perspective, that there's an expectation of more, or an understanding of more continuous, frequent contact. But when it comes back to giving and social media, I don't know, and that's kind of one of the things that we think about here all the time at Harvard Business School, and hopefully sometime down the road we'll have a better grip on it. We're exploring ways that we might be able to make a causal connection between what I do and giving.
Certainly, I'd say cause and effect in the realm of engagement as it relates to fundraising is difficult to prove across the board. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a very plausible anecdote, right? I mean, engaged alumni make better donors. There is some empirical evidence, although limited. I actually did a study at Case Western Reserve where we were able to tie engagement to giving. And engagement meant attend an event, serve on a committee, recruit a student, even updating your email address. We were able to track those that updated their personal information to giving. And what we found is that of the entire alumni base, about 100,000, 20% were engaged in something. Yet that 20% accounted for 60% of the donors, 80% of the dollars. Now, there are limits to how we could slice and dice this data, but the point was that if we at the alumni office grew the engagement pool, the sense was that the donor pool would grow as well. So adding this concrete link between engagement and giving is what we did. Now, you add the social media component. I mean, who knows? And Bob, you're thousands and thousands of alums. How do you track that to giving? I'm not quite sure. It's easier to do if you have an event list or people that volunteer in a committee, but there is some empirical evidence. And what happens then is that when you have an alumni event and you tell the dean and the development officer, look, we have all these alums that are coming to the event, they are far more likely, based on their action, their choice to come to the event, to make a gift than not. This is a donor cultivation opportunity for you. And so this is where the alumni office begins to work more as a partner with the development office. Newsflash, alumni and development can coexist? Absolutely. But once we had this empirical evidence at Case and to some degree at Ohio State, it worked extraordinarily well. I must also say that I did this study at Case purely as a defense mechanism. Budgets are being cut, and I wanted to prove that the Alumni Association was more than just that office to put on homecoming and those nice people at the alumni building. So when we were able to link engagement to giving, it really elevated our stature, but importantly, it had I think a profound effect on our relationship across campus with the development office, particularly as we were heading into a campaign. So engagement, engaged alums are better donors, but I think we now have a better sense of just how much better they are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today on this edition of Advancement Live. Before we depart today, I do want to mention our outstanding sponsors one more time. We have incredible partnerships with iModules. iModules is the leader in constituent engagement solutions, and they can help you manage all of your content in one integrated platform. You can learn more at iModules.com. And Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Join M. Stoner's co-founder and CEO, Voltaire Santos Miran, on November 3rd for a free webinar on digital storytelling. If you're looking for ways to become a better storyteller and extend the reach and impact of communications that you already produce, don't miss this great webinar. All right. Guys, we got off to a rocky start as our technology failed us, but I got to tell you, I thought that was an outstanding edition of Advancement Live. Really great thoughts there that I think everyone will be excited to check out as we will repost the show on the higheredlive.com website. Thank you for joining today, fellas.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
All right.